Hey music lovers, Sara J here. Looking for an inclusive space where you can connect with fellow fans, deep dive into your favorite music, and be a part of something special? Well, look no further. Join us on Patreon, where music and community come together. Get exclusive content, behind the scenes access, and a place to geek out over the artists you love, plus explore music you haven't heard yet. Come hang out with us. Patreon.com/DATC Media Company. That's patreon.com/DATC Media Company. See you there. A member of the DATC Media family. Wherever you want to start, okay? Because I asked you, where music came into your life, and you brought me this idea when we were talking offline. You or whatever on Messenger, whatever the phrasing is, you had mentioned this idea that you wanted to show me your guitars, that this was going to be a really great way to tell your story. So go ahead and lead the way and tell me the thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the story starts before I was born. My father played in a band in New Zealand where he is from, and he played rhythm guitar in I guess they were sort of like a tribute band, really, when I think about it. But they played mostly the music of the Shadows, who are a great instrumental rock band from England. Um, you know, I guess we call it surf rock now. Back then, he said
Yeah.
they just called it instrumental music.
Yeah.
And in the States, the Ventures, of course, were big fans, and they did a very similar thing in the US. But the Shadows were really the gold standard, and they never really broke as big in North America, from what I understand. So anyways, he played in this band, and they did Shadows covers. I've got a couple of recordings, actually. They were really great, and I've got a couple photos of him playing at the Auckland Town Hall for like a Christmas show, which is really cool. And so he had a guitar kind of like this 54 Strat. This isn't a 54 Strat. I'll explain that in a sec. But
Gorgeous though.
and he ended up in the 70s, needed some money, and he sold his Strat for $400. Now, I haven't looked up what they're worth these days, but like a lot of money. So in 2004, I convinced my mom to buy my dad a Christmas present of this 50th anniversary. So this is an American 50th anniversary Strat, and we gave it to him for Christmas. And he was kind of surprised and played it a little bit, and then about 5 years ago, he's like, I never play this thing. Why don't you just take it? So that's how I have this. I don't really play this on stage, but this is my go-to guitar at home. I have it just sort of here, and when I want to, like right now, I'm really getting into trying to learn jazz guitar, something I've never done. And so this is the one I pick up and jam along with.
I love it. You inconspicuously got a guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. So that worked out well for me, I guess.
I love that though.
Yeah. So yeah, he just found he was never playing it. He hadn't played in so long that his hobby is restoring cars now. So that's his thing. I thought maybe in retirement he might want to pick up the guitar again, but yeah. So as far as myself, it was just elementary school, playing recorder and in class, and
hot cross buns on the recorder. Our poor parents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just remember the teacher gave me the big bass, bass recorder.
Oh
and
my
so
God.
I felt kind of special because I got to play the big one, kind of like there'll be a lot of Canadian references here, but kind of like the Friendly Giant. You might not know that. It was a kid's show. The guy who played the recorder, he was a giant. It's a little 15-minute program.
It's great because when I go back and listen to this and like edit things, I will make notes, and then I will go back and I will like go and
Oh,
look
yeah,
at
you've
these
gotta
things
check
up.
out Friendly
Yeah,
Giant, check out
so
the
when I'm,
intro.
like, listening to things later on when I edit this, I'll be like, "Okay," and I'll have a
Yeah.
nice list of things, and I'll probably, like, pop links in the show notes for everybody
Yeah,
so they
definitely, definitely,
can,
you should. It's got a
absolutely.
great theme song, so,
I love it.
um, so
That's
anyway,
been something funny. I have to say this really quick. That's been something really funny that I didn't realize how many children's shows that I watched because like we didn't move up here until I was 13, but my grandparents lived up here. My mom was born and raised in Buffalo. She left when she was a teenager and then we moved back. So but we were always up here and I lived with my grandma for a little bit when I was like super little. So I didn't realize how many childhood memories I had of Canadian children's television until like kind of recently. And I'm just like, oh wow. Cause I'd be at grandma's house watching different things and I didn't realize that we were picking up, TV stations from whatever. And it's funny that like lately, so when you mentioned that, I'm like, that one I actually don't know. So
yeah. Well, if you knew did you know, Mr. Dressup?
oh yeah,
Yeah, so he was sort of the yeah, he was like the
same
Mr.
kind of thing.
Rogers of Canada, but and they worked together, and in fact, I think Mr. Dressup came first, and he helped sort of inspire Mr. Rogers, but I'd have to look more into that.
I'm
But
sure
anyways,
there is some, yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
of
so
that, yeah.
Friendly Giant led into, Mr. Dressup, which led into Sesame Street. So that was my morning routine every weekend or whenever it was on.
I love
Yeah,
that.
so anyways,
I
so the
love it.
recorder, and then grade 6, band started, and we got to write down our 3 top instruments we'd like to play, and it was, a mandatory thing in our school, which I'm thankful for. I'm not sure I would have chosen music, but I was really into sports at the time. And I chose, I think, drums number 1, bass guitar number 2, and then I didn't really have a third. My teacher said, "I'll just put down saxophone or something." Okay. And then, of course, I got number 3 because he gave the grade 7 kids the drums and the guitar. So I
Of
played
course.
saxophone and really just picked it up really quickly and loved it, practiced like crazy. And that was really the start was, yeah, grade 6 band and just finding something I was really good at. And then a bit later, a couple years later, I my friend got a guitar for his, I don't know, 12th, 13th birthday maybe. And I picked it up and I remember right away, like, he would get a bit annoyed because I would be better than him. I'd never played the thing and he had been practicing for a couple weeks. And it just kind of came naturally, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
It just
yeah,
wasn't too difficult. Um, to get little riffs or whatever and play little pieces of songs. And I just started teaching myself and that's where it started. And then I just, within a year we started a band. There was 3 of us who were good friends and we would jam out our favorite songs. This is like late 80s. So we were, all into Aerosmith and Guns N'
oh
Roses,
yeah.
The Cult. Those are the kind of bands we were listening to and learning their music. And then we started writing fairly quickly, and we started gigging actually quite a bit. We found a drummer, my good friend Bob, yeah, who passed this year. Um, so yeah, so we started a band. We had a great time in high school, and then we went on after. Kind of split into 2, and me and my friend Bob, we kept going, and we started more going towards like a more of a grunge sound. We were getting more inspired by the bands of the day from Seattle, and that was what we were doing when a band called Evil Roy Slade tracked down my number from a guitar store, which will um, be talked about a bit. Um, so up in Kelowna, BC, um, we had this awesome guitar store called Kelowna Guitar Works. And the owner, Kurt Phillips, at the time, I didn't know this, but he was just starting this brand new store. He was actually a musician um, who actually, quick sidetrack, he just played a gig last week in Germany at a big heavy metal festival with his band called Witch Killer, who had not performed in 42 years. And so in the early 80s, he was in this, metal band that had a EP and they, kind of had a cult following. and yeah, I guess the opportunity came, and he's retired now, and yeah, so crazy story, but
Yeah, a little
uh,
bit.
yeah. So anyway, Kurt gave this singer from a band called Evil Roy Slade. It's kind of a strange name, but it's taken
Totally.
from an old Western B movie that I guess the singer's dad always quoted.
I love
And
it.
we, well, they were looking for a fourth member. They were a three-piece at the time. They wanted another guitar player, someone who could sing too. And at the time, I was fronting my band. We were doing kind of half original, half covers, and he kind of scouted me out, and they were like my favorite band. They were like, I loved this band. I would go see them all over town. I would wear their shirt. um I remember, like I'd be at the mall, and I'm 18 years old, and I'd be wearing the shirt, and then I'd see the singer. I'm like, oh, like starstruck. And anyways, so and
Fangirl a little bit.
yes, so they brought me in, and I auditioned. And the funny story about this was, they gave me like a pre-copy of a pre-release of this album that was recorded before I was in the band. And one of the solos I was having a really hard time with, I started actually like tabbing out. Like I had to really listen over and over this one section. And then I get to rehearsal, and we jam, and we play, a bunch of songs that I, learned, fairly easily. But this solo comes, and I start playing it, and then they all start looking at me, and they're kind of like giving me a funny face. And I thinking, okay, like I guess I'm not doing very well. And then the song ends. They said, "You realize that that's like a backwards solo?" Like they were just shocked that I learned it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. At the time, I didn't. I mean, it's very obvious now when I hear it, but I just wonder. I was finding it so strange that it was really unnatural the way it was put together, and so it made perfect sense. So I think that's one of the things that got me the job.
I love that, but I love that it was, like, your favorite band and then they sought you out.
Yeah. So
That's cosmic.
it was, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a tough decision because I had to leave a band that I was playing with a couple
Yeah.
of good friends, and it was, I remember it was actually the other guitar player, Gord, who said, if it was me, I would do it, because I was really torn. I wasn't quite sure what to do, and that was kind of what made me
Yeah,
yeah, do it. And so
for sure.
we started playing. So now to backtrack just a little bit. So the last day of high school, like the day I graduated, I happened to get a car, like a kind of beater car. My parents had bought me, for my birthday a year earlier, but it wasn't operational, so it kind of got pieced together over the year. And that last day of school, they gave it to me, and I went into town to the guitar store, Guitar Works, and I picked up my first Les Paul,
Mhm.
and brought it back. I was late for my chemistry exam, but
Whatever.
and
Good reason.
I had this Les Paul in my trunk, um, and luckily it didn't get stolen or anything. But anyways, the
That's
story
what I
about
was
this could,
thinking too. I was like
yeah, I know that whenever I tell this story, that's where people think I'm going with it. But um, but no, this guitar, I just loved, the look of it. Tobacco Sunburst. It's a 1977. Um, and there's quite the story behind this. So I started playing this guitar in Evil Roy Slade, and it just didn't have the sound that I was going for. It's got the mini humbucker pickups, which they're known for, and it just didn't have the quite the crunch I needed.
Mhm.
And so I ended up trading it in, and that's when I was introduced to GNL. And so Kurt, the witch killer guitar store owner, he recommended GNL. He had just become a dealer for them, and he's told me the story. This is Leo Fender's new company. They're all handmade in California. They're, you know this is the way to go. And so I traded in the Les Paul, and got my first GNL. So this is a GNL ASAT. And the thing I loved about it was they let me sort of customize the color. It's a bit
I
dark
like
in
that
here, but
blue.
it's a blue
Um,
burst. But I said I wanted it to be really dark along the edges,
It's like a
so it had
midnight
more.
blue. So,
Yes.
like, the edges are, like, a little darker
They're
than
almost like black around the
oh,
edge.
yep, yep,
Um, there
yeah,
we go.
you can tell, like, right there. Yep,
And yeah, so it was
gorgeous.
awesome because it was the first guitar that was like made just for me. Like I knew that they had, I got to choose the type of neck and a few of the details. And so anyway, this guitar really became my main guitar for that band. And uh, one other, I know you're a gear head, so
Yes, please.
yeah.
Oh, thanks.
And we were at rehearsal one day, and Kurt again calls up and he said, I've got a new consignment guitar that just came in today. Before it goes on the shelves tomorrow, I'm going to bring it by rehearsal. And he just knew I'd fall in love with it because I had regretted kind of trading in my Les Paul, but I wasn't using it really. So he said this might be more up to
Oh,
So this is a cherry red Les Paul
oh,
custom. I think it's an '89. It was fairly, it was only a couple years old at the time. This is probably about 93, 94. And yeah, so I picked up this. If he gave me a great deal on it, and so those were my two main guitars, the Les Paul and the ASAT. And yeah, and we played this like kind of like grungy kind of um I don't know, uh hard rock, like Soundgarden influenced kind of stuff. And we did really well. We had a lot of radio play up where we were from, and we made the move down to Vancouver, and that's what brought me back here. So I was born in Vancouver, moved up to Okanagan when I was 4, and then moved down with the band to take a go at it. And so we did really well for a while. We did 2 cross Canada tours, just self booked in a van. One was in the winter of '96, early '96, and one was in the summer of the same year. So we
I'm
got to
sure
do
the one in the
Canada.
summer was a little little less
They were,
troublesome.
yeah, and it was just crazy. Like, you know, getting in a van and going across this huge country, and we really discovered how difficult it is to make it as a band in Canada. It is, especially Western Canada.
I'm
Like
sure.
from Vancouver, we had to
Yeah.
drive all the way to Edmonton, which we're talking
So
14
how
hours or
far is
whatever,
that? How many hours?
like 14.
Oh my God.
And then
That's like me driving from Buffalo to Chicago.
yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty much like give or take. It's kind of like the same time frame because you switch time zones and everything. So that's kind of like for me time frame and that's just like insanity.
yeah. And so you can imagine how much gas you're using. And I mean, this is back when gas was like 49 cents a liter, and we still lost money.
Still though. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be lucky to get a couple $100 at a gig. So we go across Canada, do all the main cities up out to about Toronto. Think we may have gone to Ottawa on one of them, but definitely not past. And so yeah, we learned how difficult it was to not only um, just make any money, but even just to get a following, because you can't just keep going out and on the road and losing money. So uh, it was really tough. But along the way, we played some great shows. We Probably the biggest one that sticks out to me is we played in Winnipeg at a place called the Pyramid, and we were opening for um, there's a band on the playlist I gave you, the Canadian playlist, a band called the Pursuit of Happiness. And there's
Yeah.
a couple of women in the band who had a side project, and so we were opening for their band, and we thought, okay, so they've got a following, we'll be okay. But it was a Sunday night, and it just didn't work out, and there was
Yeah.
not a great crowd. But the owner did like us, and so he was like, I'm going to try and get you something on the way back, because I feel bad. And so on the way back, we got added last minute to a show, a band from North Carolina called Archers of Loaf.
Mhm.
Just an amazing 90s indie band, and that was just amazing, like sold out show at, a large club, and just to see them sound check, I'd never heard of them, and I just remember like sitting beside the drum riser watching sound check and just blown away by this band, and had such a fun night, and ended up, hanging out with the guys a bit, and really became a huge fan, and that really influenced my playing a lot. And um and if you don't know much about their music, they're very just like, um noisy, a lot of dissonance, a lot of like almost like a Sonic Youth or Pavement style, like that kind of like, um bendy notes not quite in tune, or
It's funny that
um
you brought them up because my mom did a lot of stuff with bands in the '90s when we lived in North Carolina, because I lived on the coast. I lived close to Wilmington. My dad was in the military, so, he was stationed on Camp Lejeune, um, and we stayed there, and he traveled, but, so my mom did a lot with bands and live music and local things and did concert photography, a lot when I was a kid, and it's funny you brought them up because I haven't heard that name in forever. I remember seeing, like, on a flyer that my mom had for the music magazine that she worked for, so I'm just, like, wrapping my mind around this right now. It's so funny, like, what a small world in such a weird way. That's
yeah.
crazy. That's amazing. But what a, like,
Yeah.
awesome opportunity and to open for them how it inspired your playing the way that it did.
Yeah, it really did. It just made me. I mean, we were already in the period of the '90s when it was uncool to do a guitar solo anymore.
Yeah,
So, when,
yeah.
if you even listen to the first couple Pearl Jam albums, they're just full of guitar solos, and then they kind of made a conscious decision to like do less of them. And um I'm not sure the whole band was in agreement about that from what I've read, um but a lot of bands they were kind of, and I think a lot of it was Nirvana, like when Nevermind came out, a lot of the guitar solos were more just like playing the melody.
Mhm.
um and so everything was kind of simplified, and so I was looking at ways to play that were a little less, I guess, traditional solos. I mean, most of my solos were kind of noisy and experimental anyways, so it wasn't a huge shift, but the main thing was I started, one thing I did with my Les Paul was I got super heavy gauge strings to stop myself from bending strings, or to make it more difficult to bend strings. And so, and I just did it on purpose, just as an experiment, to see if I could just get out of those same patterns that I was following. And it really did help. And I started playing with kind of quarter tone thing, bends that were a little out of tune, and just doing some of those things that I saw archers do. And yeah, so, um, the yeah, actually, one more quick story from the tour. I forget if it was the summer one or not, but yeah, we played it. We were driving out. We stop in Calgary, and we're playing a great club there, and we're opening for a local band called Placebo, and this is not the Placebo from England. Um, and we ended up, loving this band, and we crashed on the singer's floor that night or whatever. And um and then fast forward, like, I don't know, 5 years, and I'm at a show at the PNE, which is a fair, so like the summer fair in Vancouver, and I see this woman up on stage with a band called By Divine Right, who is on my playlist that I gave you.
Mhm.
Um, and she's playing, rhythm guitar for this band, and thought that, oh, that's pretty cool. And then maybe a few months later, I go to see the Tragically Hip at the Coliseum here, and they're opening. They're opening for the Hip. And then a couple of years later, I don't think too much of it. And then a couple of years later, I'm at my cousin's house for just a dinner party or something, and I hear this music, and I'm like, something I'd never heard before, and as a female singer, and kind of interesting music, and, oh, what is this? And It's like, oh, she's called Feist. I'm like, oh, like, and it was it was Leslie Feist, the singer of Placebo. And so that was pretty cool. And then I remember a couple years later, we were in New York, my only trip to New York that I've had in 2005. And I remember my wife and I were like, just I think we weren't quite married yet, but we were in New York, and I saw she was playing. I was like, oh, this, you know, I didn't know her well or whatever, but I had met her a couple times and thought, oh, let's go check it out. So we get to the club, and I'm expecting we'll just walk in, and I'll be like, hey, remember me? um, we get there. There's this massive lineup around the block, and the
Yeah.
bouncer's like, this has been sold out for like months. Like, what? Like, I was just so blown away by just how you
Yeah.
know yeah, which
Yeah.
was yeah. So it's neat. Like there's when you do this long enough, you kind of have those people you meet, and it's neat. It's just so cool to see where people go, and um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's so cool to watch people become who they are. I think I just said that to somebody else. I commented like on social media or whatever, and kind of, you follow along with people in different capacities now, and and like you said, when you watch people kind of come into their own, it's a very cool thing to witness. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then so this band, so again, the band was called Evil Roy Slade. We had two albums out. We recorded all the time, like we were in the studio all the time, just recording demos, and we have, I don't know, dozens and dozens of unreleased tracks. Like we easily have, had music to put out more albums, but we were looking for a deal at the time, and it just never happened. We played one really cool show was we played the side stage at Lollapalooza in
That's
'95. So that would have been Hole and Pavement, Sonic Youth, uh, that year, and
yeah,
so we were chosen out of like 400 bands submitted tapes, and they chose four, and
that's
we were
very
chosen.
cool.
And yeah, and that was just amazing. I mean, I don't remember a second of it,
Of
other
course,
than other than
all
the
whirlwind.
yeah, totally. The one thing I do remember is the other band that played with us was Strapping Young Lad, which was, you know, you could tell right away they were going places. There was some buzz around them already, and then they ended up, blowing up. And of course, Devin Townsend's still, a huge, influence today on the scene. And so so we had some big shows. We played up, like a university in Prince George with 5440 opening for them. Had a huge show, and so we had our moments, and things around 95, 96 was felt like we had some momentum, and then just never really happened. Nickelback was the band from the scene that we were, they were part of that same kind of group of bands, and obviously they went on to take over, and so we never really broke up. We just kind of fizzled out over the years. We kept going for quite a while, um, but I, in the meantime, decided it was time to, you know, get a job. So I went to university. Actually, I did a music degree. I picked my saxophone back up again, um, and ended up doing a music degree at UBC here in Vancouver. And um, and while I was at UBC, I started playing. I started sort of, I was being introduced to all this music, throughout history. Like you're taking courses where you're studying the history of music from, Gregorian chant all the way up to the modern day. And so I was just being bombarded by all this new music. I mean, rock has always been my go-to, but all of, I'm being introduced to all these things that I hadn't really listened to or didn't know a lot about. And so that started to really influence me, and I still wanted to create music. And so I started a band with so I'm playing, in a wind ensemble, saxophone, and like playing, like kind of classical style music, mostly playing in a jazz band as well, singing in the choir, doing all these things while I'm doing my degree. But and Evil Roy Slade is still going at this time. We're morphing into more of like you know turned into more of like a Americana style. Like that's kind of the style that the lead, you know guy was going. and I wasn't totally into it. I was sort of losing interest in that in that style, and so I started playing with my cousin, who's not he had never played before, never played an instrument, but he's a writer, so he's really good with words. And good friend of his, Tom, and a buddy of mine, Steve, from high school, who was supposed to be the drummer of my very first band, and it never worked out. I brought him on, and he and the four of us started making this really experimental, crazy music, and we were like all over the place. Like I was experienced and going to school for music, and these guys um, were how can I
Just
put it? Yeah, they were. I mean, one guy definitely had experience, but a little less like schooled. Let's call it like
yeah.
very uh, but he was a really creative guy and did some really cool stuff. So we started playing this really crazy music, and this is must have been 98, 99, and so music was really changing around that time too. So we were
Hmm.
really influenced by I don't know, like Mogwai and Sigur Rós and um, bands like that,
Uh,
spiritualized, Radiohead, whatever was happening at the time.
yep.
And so we were doing some really cool stuff. But what ended up happening was my cousin sent me a couple of loops, and just on my own, I started adding parts to it, creating some guitar parts and adding whatever, and then I sent it back to him. And this is like my first experience with home recording, and very simple setup, like one microphone, um, a, a, a Mac G4, and this is probably about 2002, and he wrote some lyrics and then came over, recorded them, and then we had a couple of songs, and just you know, so it was like an offshoot of this other band we were in, but we were kind of keeping it secret, and so he called it Windows 78. He's like something that never happened, um, and we submitted these two songs to a local music festival. So Music West was an annual festival, kind of like a South by Southwest, but much smaller scale, in Vancouver every year. My previous band had played it a number of times, not thinking we'd get picked at all, but they had an online application. This is like early days of the internet, and we submit, or not that early, but early for me.
Early.
And we actually got chosen by Network Records, which is Sarah McLaughlin's company in town here. They invited us to a showcase with about 3 4 other bands at a place called the Railway Club, which is it was like not there anymore, but it was like the musicians club. It was like
Yeah.
where musicians hang out, basically, like the
Yeah.
more seasoned people. So but it's just two of us. So then we're like, well, we need a band. We need like can't just like sit up there with computers. That's kind of lame. So we found a guy who played drums, a guy we knew, and we thought of a band that the band we were in at the time had played with, and we thought of like a band that we thought of a guitar player, this guy John Lucas, he was actually a music writer for the local music magazine, and we asked him if he'd be interested, and he said yes. So he joined, and then we quickly wrote some more songs, and we maybe a cover or two, and we played this showcase, and nothing really came of it. But it was cool. It sort of forced us to put together a band, and we ended up recording a couple of albums, and that I'm really proud of, especially the first one, which was a full length done in the studio, a studio called Vaugville, which is actually the son of, if you've heard of Fluvog shoes, very
Yes.
famous Vancouver company.
Yep.
The son, uh, I think he was also named Jonathan, had a studio, and so we recorded at his studio with a guy named Caleb Stull, who's out in Toronto, um, and he did an awesome job with this album, which we call the Window Seat. You can find this on
Is that I'm
online.
gonna look at this because I had that playlist, and then it's funny because the first time that I brought up the playlist on the Sunday Evening Jam, um, Jamie wouldn't tell me at first when I was like the songs that I had moved over to my favorites, and he was like, "Oh, well, I'll wait for you to figure it out." So then I had to go like on a thing, my own little search, and then I messaged you. I was like, "Wait a minute, this is your band? Hold on, back up."
Yeah,
Was
that was
so good.
yeah, I'm glad I didn't tell you. Yeah, I snuck a couple of my own band songs on that playlist, and I didn't yeah, I decided not to tell you and just see. I didn't really expect that you'd say anything, but
Well, and
um
it was because he
uh,
had asked me to elaborate because I've been listening to it like in 1 hour chunks because it's like 7 hours long, and so far it's done really well with. I think maybe one or twice I've gotten like a repeat song. So it's done really good with like shuffling it good, even though I come back to it. Sometimes it'll be like a day or two before I can come back to it. So he had asked me like, what were the songs that you had moved over to my own liked ones. And so I brought it up and he was like, "Oh, do you know whose band that is?" And I was like, "No." So then when I found out, I was even more excited. So
yeah, that's awesome.
the
Yeah, I'm
song
glad
I
you
have
liked it.
on here that I really, really like is A Couple Lines. I really, really like that song a lot.
Yeah,
That one's got a lot of
that
fun.
I really like that one too. That's one where that was actually funny because we had recorded the whole album in I think just 4 days. Um and we were going into mix. I think we had another maybe 2 days to mix. And while we were jamming that week, we decided like, oh, it'd be nice if we had like one more kind of faster song. So it's pretty mellow album. And we basically came up with this song and wrote it really quickly, and decided we'd record it when like before we mixed. We'd like set up the drums again and just do a quick one extra song. And it ended up being the song that we kind of pushed to radio. But we didn't do a tour, but we went out to Alberta and back, and we did do a little push with promotion. Like we hired someone just to do a little thing across Canada in the the music magazines in Canada, and to the college radio. CBC actually did play a couple lines, a fair amount, I'd say, and this is 2006.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, we did the very first song on the album, "Pal," um, was picked up by Loaded Skateboards or Longboards or whatever it's called, down in California. So they used it for a really cool video they put on YouTube, which you can still find. I think I don't know what it's called, but it's
That's
um,
very cool
I'll try
too.
to find it for you.
That's very
And
cool.
yeah, yeah. But a couple lines was a cool song because this is a time in our lives when we're transitioning into careers. Like I'm a teacher now, and we were all kind of we kind of knew music was like when we started Windows 78. We weren't trying to make it big. We were already like at that stage in our lives where we're starting to get married, maybe starting to have kids. And so a couple lines really is about that. So if you listen to the lyrics, it's really about just getting older, and the some people thought it was a drug reference or something, but it's no, it's like a couple lines once a year. It's like
Yeah.
keeping in touch with. I mean, you could take that way if you want, but it's
Could
like
be.
these you have your friends, like some of the friends I've mentioned today, like my friend Matt from my very first band, the guy who you know I played his guitar. Um, we do, he's out in Alberta now, and we keep in touch. A couple times a year we text, and that's kind of what it is now. And we still are. I'd consider us close friends still, but it's like that's just what happens in life, right? Like you start meeting new people, and you know uh, so that song, I really love the lyrics. Like I said, Mark was not a musician when we started the band, and my cousin Mark, who is the vocalist, but he was a great writer. He was working actually for Adbusters magazine at the time, and just had so many ideas. And the whole concept behind the window seat, that album, is it was about like isolation through technology. And think of this is 2006. We're writing these songs anywhere from 2003 to 2006, and just that kind of seeing where technology was taking us. I think like that was really on his mind at the time. And and when I think back to that, it just really feels like, it's almost 20 years old now, and just felt really, prophetic, and is that a word, in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and
And how
yeah,
relevant too, like even 20 years, like just how much more relevant it is with time passing, which is
yeah,
very
definitely.
interesting. That it's actually more relevant now than when it was written, which is always a very um special gift when it comes to music, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I can talk about that band a little bit longer, so
Yeah,
the
of
centerpiece of
course.
that, the centerpiece of this album, which again, it's on iTunes and Spotify and everything. Um, it's here's the cover. Uh,
Love that.
so right in the middle of this album are three songs called Spirit. I think this is the right order: Spirit, Pathfinder, and Opportunity. And those are the three names of the, at the time, the three space rovers up on Mars. And so those three songs are actually sort of like personifying these three robots, and but the lyrics on these songs is just incredible. Like, they're so good.
I
um
need to listen to the full album. I have not done that, but now
yeah,
that you're
definitely.
talking, it's like going to be my top priority tomorrow for sure. I'm definitely going to listen
Yeah,
to the album in its entirety.
yeah, lyrically, like, I really like, I'm really proud of this one. As far as from my, what, I was kind of the main music writer, I guess, on the album. And the one thing I did do a lot of was I was using Ebo a lot at the time. And so a lot of the albums kind of tied together, lyrically, but also with little some musical ideas, mostly Ebo. The album starts and ends with like a kind of like astronaut samples, and it worked out really, like, as an album. It really is meant to be played from start to finish.
I love it.
Yeah, something I'm proud of.
Fuck yeah.
Um, yeah, and we
Awesome.
did put out.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm totally listening. So it'll be like the first music I listen to tomorrow because
Okay, awesome.
wanna
Yeah,
listen to
I'll
that.
be interested, in what you think of the, we called it the Mars trilogy, or I guess the Mars trilogy or whatever.
I love it.
Um,
Mars is my favorite planet too. Like even when I was a kid, I was just like
okay,
Mars was like my thing. So
yeah.
this is cool. I love it. Very, very cool. Awesome.
Um,
Awesome.
and yeah, so anyways, this band was a lot of fun, and we did what we play. I mean, trying to think, we opened for Mono once, Japanese, you know, post rock band. We opened for Kala. They were, I think, from New York, and they were pretty cool. We opened for the Album Leaf. That was probably our biggest show as far as venue. But again, we knew this was a hobby at this point, and even like a couple lines, the song, talks, dreams or hobbies. Um, and it was really freeing, I think, like for me, like knowing that the end goal of this band wasn't to, get a deal, or get famous or something, like, whereas in Evil Roy Slade, that was the push was like, this is going to be like, we want to do this as a job. Never worked out, and so just going in with that mindset, I think, really.
And not having that pressure on it either,
Yeah,
not having that kind of this type of energy around it. It was just more able to be a kind of a free flow thing. It had a different vibe around it. It wasn't that we have to do it this way. This has to happen. It has to work. So it gives a
exactly.
different vibe around the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. So we did one more album, or EP, about 2010, I want to say, and this was a totally self-recorded. This was more, and it's online too. The album's called Again, and it was basically centered around a song called Again that we had written, that I really loved and I really wanted to get out. And so I kind of, I just put together this. I mean, I recorded in our jam space under the craziest conditions. Like, if you could, I wish I had video of this, because if you could see the cables and like the conditions we recorded this in, it was crazy. Like I remember trying to rig up something so the drummer could hear the songs, which we had barely rehearsed. And I remember I was having to play my guitar like not plugged into anything. I think I was plugged directly into his headphones or something crazy, like so I couldn't hear myself playing the songs. And but I knew that if I didn't do it, it would never get out there. And so we had a couple songs that probably weren't quite as polished as they could have been. I know, yeah. So I did it all the recording of the instruments, took it into the studio where we had been before for the last album, brought in Caleb again, who mixed it and recorded vocals at his house. So he did do the vocals, but I remember going into the vocal session and Mark hadn't finished the lyrics. Um, so one song, he just repeats the same thing twice.
Hot lyrics. You're like finishing the lyrics as you're recording them, like in
Yeah,
real time.
yeah, it was. But overall, I'm proud of that one too in a different way. Like it was because I did so much of the work on it. I'm actually blown away by how the drums sound, and I mean a lot of that was Caleb in the studio, tweaking things. But I got some decent sounds for a first time and not really having any training in engineering. Um, and some good songs, I think. There was one at the end. There's one called Tom Hanks, which is you have to know my cousin's sense of humor, but he would always be the guy at the party like arguing that Tom Hanks is like the most overrated actor that he's like. So the lyrics in the song is like basically it's just Tom Hanks in like in another costume, like like it's just Tom Hanks with a fishbowl on his head, like referencing Apollo or whatever. Or like it's just and it's actually gets pretty nasty, but it's like all in fun. I hope that if you ever heard it, he would know where he seems like a great guy and
He
everything.
would have
So
a
I feel
sense of
bad
humor
about it,
about it.
but it is pretty funny. Like I'm not going to say the lyrics, but if you look it up, it's pretty funny.
That's
Dark
all of
eye.
the I can find this on Spotify too, yeah.
It's all on, yeah, it's all up
Okay.
there. And that one we really seriously debated not putting up, but and we had to make some edits because our drummer had never heard the song before. So like that was a last minute. We had just written it, um, and I had to teach it to him really quickly, and then do a little bit of splicing just because like the field changes here and you didn't quite get it, or there's like a time change in the middle, and I think I only made one splice actually, but it was just pieced together last minute. So
I love
but we threw it on there anyways. Oh, and we did a cool cover of Hayden's, so another Canadian, uh, Trees Lounge. So I'm not sure if you ever saw that movie.
it.
It's a
Mm-mm.
Steve Buscemi film. I believe he might have even wrote it. Actually, I think Buscemi wrote the movie. So he actually has writing credits on it too. So because some of the lyrics are from the film. So Hayden, who's like a well-known singer-songwriter up here, he wrote this song Trees Lounge, and we covered it a little bit faster, um pretty faithful to the original otherwise, and that was a fun one too. That one gets quite a few plays, on Spotify and stuff. Or I mean for us, I mean I'm talking like pennies. uh but
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, actually, speaking of which, I mean, we've had our music up online for many years now, and like since 2006. And so when Spotify happened, like even us at our level where we were getting like very small checks here and there, but it was regular, like every couple months you get a check, and it wasn't a lot of money, but they just dropped off the face of the earth. Like we're getting the same amount of streams or plays, but ever since like back then it was like iTunes, so you might get 60 cents when someone downloads a song. They're paying for it. With streams though, like like I think I've had one payment in the last 7 years from that music. So
I always wondered how that worked,
crazy.
and I've never actually asked any of my numerous music friends how that works, like what
Yeah,
you get in terms of whatever, because it's like each streaming service like pays artists differently is my understanding too, and like it's a whole controversy because I guess Spotify doesn't pay very well or the artist at all. Like I know it's a whole messy thing with streaming music and what they actually
yeah,
compensate artists. Unless you're getting, a billion stream, people are listening to your song a billion times. So it's very intriguing to me how the whole thing works out from your end, from your perspective of it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's not that big a deal because we weren't making, we weren't trying to make a living at it. But the amount, like I don't know what the percentage would be that we draw. It's like, you know, 4,000, 4,000%. I have no idea. I haven't looked at it,
Right.
um, but I feel bad for the sort of middle range bands, right? Like the bands who are trying to make a go at it, who are, playing clubs and getting, good, decent amounts of streams that are still just getting paid nothing. Like, I mean, if you, yeah, I just can't imagine
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
drop in, if you take like X amount of CDs sold in the 90s versus that same amount of like people streaming your music now. It would be like, I'd love to see like data on that because it's,
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I would nerd out on some graphs and pie charts about that information for sure.
So the main guitar that I used in Windows 78 was another GNL. This is a GNL Legacy, which is the Strat, model of the GNL series, and I had it done in a blue burst as just like my ASAT, just so they'd match, and I really love the color. And again, had them do it kind of darker on the edges, and went with a rosewood fretboard for this guitar. I have the ebony on the ASAT. And yeah, this was the main guitar I used for the whole time I was in Windows 78. I don't really play it anymore. In gift shop, I don't, Paul never played Strats, so I stick to my ASAT and my two Les Pauls and a couple of acoustics I play in that band. But we'll see if that.
Gorgeous. Everybody knows I love my GNLs. I
Yeah,
don't play, but I just love GNLs. They're just gorgeous.
yeah,
And they're just great instruments too.
they
So,
are. Yeah,
I love Dave and the whole crew over there. So, they're
yeah, no,
amazing.
yeah,
So, before we get into, present day musically for you, I want to go back a little bit and talk about being a music lover because you really focused on playing music, but take me through being a music fan. Like, what was the music that you were listening to growing up? What was like the albums that really shaped your life? What were those?
sure. I'll gloss over some pretty quickly because I've mentioned a couple of these bands already, um, but yeah, it started out. I think it was the summer after grade 7, going into high school, and my friend Matt with the guitar, he was playing, I think, uh, "Permanent Vacation" by Aerosmith, and it didn't really click for me. I just remember we were in a camper driving back from a camping trip, didn't think anything of it, and about, I don't know, a couple weeks later, I heard Ragdoll on the radio.
My God.
And Ragdoll was my gateway, I guess. Maybe because I was a saxophone player.
Yeah.
I was like 12, 13, whatever. But something about Steve Tyler's voice really grabbed me. And I just
Yep.
heard it on the radio. And I was just like, wow, like I really like his voice. Like I love how gravelly it is, but in control still. And I like the horns. Um, and so I went out and I used my paper route money I went to Sears and I grabbed a Walkman and the Permanent Vacation cassette and just played it over and over and over
Oh,
and
that's
over and over and over.
amazing.
Like I know every sound on that album. And then that, I kind of branched out from there, slowly at first. Like I really actually got into the old Aerosmith, like the 70s stuff, like more
Oh,
so. Like,
yeah.
and to me, anything after Permanent Vacation is just I don't really listen to, but I still go back
Mhm.
once in a while to some of the albums that people don't. I mean, like I
I
love
think
like Done with
sometimes people
Mirrors.
don't
Like,
realize that it's actually Aerosmith
yeah,
because the classic rock radio station, which is like the only radio, if I'm listening to the radio, 97 Rock's the only thing I listen to. And they have been on the air playing music since the classic rock they're playing now was the new music, you know? So, like, I remember listening to 97 Rock when I was a kid, and it's the thing in Buffalo. And there's a lot of times that we'll have stuff on, and even I've said to my daughter, I'm like, like, this is Aerosmith, like, it'll come up and she'll be like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because this is old Aerosmith, and it's really good." And people I think don't realize that it is, because they just, they think of like Armageddon when they think of Aerosmith. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Eh,
what their like thought is. And I'm like, oh no, 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 no. There's so much more than that.
yeah, definitely. Um, and also, I think I felt a bit of a connection too because they recorded um, that album here like in Vancouver. So I kind of thought that was pretty
That's
cool that they
cool.
were. And then my friend got really into GNR, and so I started liking them too. And the Cult was a big one. I remember we found me and Matt, we found a cassette tape that'd been like we think thrown out of a car window or something. So we found on the side of the road, no case, just the cassette of Sonic Temple, and we took that home and started listening to it. And
What an
um,
amazing treasure find.
yeah,
That's literally the universe, though.
yeah, yeah.
Like here.
Um, so that was the stuff I was into at first, and then of course, like I mentioned, late high school. Like I was in grade 11 when, you know, 1991, which is when all those albums came out with Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Chili Peppers, Nirvana, Metallica, like all those things. I was into all that. Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam were probably my two favorites at the time. Um, and then going from there, like Pumpkins were big for me, especially the first few albums. Um, but as far as like, I'm trying to think of like, shifts in my taste. Like after that, it was actually probably the album that really hooked me. I was in the studio with Evil Roy Slade. This is late in our, so this is like 99-ish, I think. We were spending some money to make one last, ultimate demo to, you know, send off to record companies. And it was awesome. We were in this Mushroom Studios, big, like well-known studio here in Vancouver. I don't think it's around anymore, but and we recorded like I think we only did two songs or two or three, but we did them over and over. Like I remember doing like 40 takes trying to get like a perfect take of these songs and just being so it was just not
Exhausting.
how I like working really.
Yeah.
But we were really trying to push ourselves to get that perfect take. And what we got sounds great. But anyway, we during a break we went in the studio into the booth and or the mixing station or whatever, and the engineer, I can't think of who it was, but he put on a new album by the Flaming Lips, the Soft Bulletin, and hearing Spoonful Weighs a Ton coming out of studio speakers was just like mind blowing. Like and that album, I went out and bought it right away, and I put on. Remember the first song, "Race for the Prize," comes on this weird warbly keyboard, and that album really, if like that, made me see things a little differently, and that's kind of what led into that experimental band I was talking about. Um, my love of the Lips. Um, Actually, kind of sidetrack, but interesting story we were just talking about the other day. So on Netflix right now, there's this story about a woman who went missing on a cruise ship that everyone's talking about, and we watched it. And one of the people in it, one of the women in it, I forget her role, but she advocates for cruise ship safety because her daughter had died on a cruise ship back in 2005. I was Me and my wife were on that, and my cousin, the singer of Windows 78, we were on the cruise where this woman died. Not the one from the documentary, but this other one. It was a Flaming Lips cruise, so they did a thing called the Zingolati Groove Cruise out of Long Beach and down to Ensenada, Mexico in I think it was 2005 October, and we went on this cruise ship and watch the Flaming Lips on the rocking ocean after a day in in Mexico. And then yeah, it was just a crazy experience. They did a Zyrica party, if you know what that is, the four CDs played at the same
Mhm.
time. And the Lips actually hosted it, and they did a screening of their movie that it just was about to be released.
Very cool.
Um, yeah, and but yeah, unfortunately, there was this. You know, like we got back to port in Long Beach, and the FBI was not letting anybody off the boat. And I remember even the band was like on their phones to, you know, their spouses saying, "Sorry, I don't know what's going on here." And so yeah, so it turns out there was a maybe a
It's fucking
suspicious
wild.
death. Yeah, anyways,
Wow.
so we were just talking about that the other day. I was going through the photos. Anyways, Flaming Lips,
That's
big
wild.
big
I've only
influence
seen
on
the
me.
Flaming Lips one time. They were at a music festival that it's in Peoria, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago. And I've gone to numerous times over the years, attending and then working it with the media company in varying degrees. Summer Camp Music Festival, they played, they always have like their Sunday night. They'll always have like I've seen Willie Nelson there. I saw the Smashing Pumpkins there. I saw the Flaming Lips there. They'll always have like that kind of headliner on Sunday night. So because I've gone to that festival a bunch, I've been able to catch, sets from bands that I probably wouldn't get the chance to see just because of when I was born. I talked about that with when Darren was on the show, was like the advantage that he has is like when he was born, he not only was around when this music was being released, but the bands were touring in support of this music. And so that's why he's been able to rack up being able to see all these bands and stuff. So I'm grateful that a lot of times I've been able to see bands because they'll play that Sunday night headliner at a festival that I'm working at. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, I've gotten to see, some people I haven't wouldn't otherwise have been able to see. So definitely
Yeah.
a really great show though, even though it was a festival show. So I know it's a little different, but still a very cool experience. So at least been like, all right, I got to see them. So that was cool.
Yeah, they're definitely worth seeing. I've probably seen about a dozen times in total all different scenarios and venues, and yeah, oh, they always put on a good show. There's been good and not so good versions of the actual band. You know, like
Yeah.
there's been times when they didn't sound the greatest, but the last couple times I saw them though, they've got a larger band now, which is nice. Like so they'll have two drummers sometimes, and I really like that because if you don't know the Lips well, Stephen Drodes is he's the main guy. Like he's doing all the drums and the keyboards and the guitars, and so he fills so many roles that when they didn't have enough people doing that on stage, it was a bit empty, I thought, or too many like pre-recorded things for my taste. But yes, the Lips were a big one. Going backwards in time, like I mentioned Archers of Loaf already, so that would be
Yeah.
another big one where like I got big into them and that, indie, um, just that indie rock. And if I were to choose a music that, something that, like when I hear that jangly guitar, that, indie rock sound from the 90s, like I just love it. Like, I don't know, like Superchunk or,
It
um,
lights up something
yeah,
inside of you.
yeah, yeah. Or when I hear even newer bands that are doing, one of the bands I'll talk about on our next show Saturday, um, it gives me those kind of vibes, but they're a new band. So, um, yeah. Then going past that, I mean, like I talked about music school and just being, you know, listening to classical music and of from the ages. Like, so that was obviously an influence, and even like concert band music. Like, there's some really amazing stuff, especially contemporary music. Some really great composers doing really cool things with band music. Um,
Mhm.
but what else? After would have been, I don't know. I guess I mean maybe about 10 years ago, I saw the War on Drugs for the first time, and I they're the best. I mean, in my opinion, they're the best live band in the world right now.
I saw them once
Incredible,
at a
incredible.
music festival also. They were like the Saturday night, I think it was the Sacred Rose Festival, and that was also like outside of Chicago. And they were like the Saturday, and I had no idea who they were actually at the time. We were all just kind of like vibing in the back half of where the stage was because it was so brutally hot like during the day. And so, the sun finally goes down and everybody's just like so grateful that it's not a million degrees in a field somewhere. And so um, I admittedly didn't know anything about them until like after, and I investigated. I was like, who was that we were hanging out and listening to? So yeah, they were a great time.
Yeah, definitely check out their live albums. They've got 2 now, and they are incredible. Like, it's a perfect place to
Okay.
sort of start if you don't know them very well.
Okay.
Um, so good. But yeah, actually, the first time I saw them was interesting too because I think this might be the only time in my life I've had tickets to 2 concerts on the same night. So my buddy and I, we went down to
What a
Stanley
good
Park.
problem to have.
Yeah, we went down to a place called the Malkin Bowl in Stanley Park, which is like the park in downtown Vancouver, and we saw Future Islands, and then also the only concert I've ever been to where they ran out of beer. They ran out of beer in the opening band, which
Oh,
was just weird. So, anyways,
somebody did not do their job right.
yeah, I know. Like, and they had this. You were only allowed to drink in this one little area, and so we were having a couple beer, and we went over to that. We had to, so we had like this little tiny area, and it's an outdoor like open, like there's no seating. It's just a general admission thing. It was just really bizarre. And then we watched them, and then Spoon was actually the headliner, but we were like, no, we've got tickets to War on Drugs, so we left. We missed Spoon. We made it rush downtown and went to this other venue, the Vogue, and saw the War on Drugs. This would have been, I don't know, 2011 or something. Or no, after that, 2014. I don't know.
Time is
Times.
I can't, it's so hard for me to keep any years straight. I feel like now it's just like back in the day. We're just going to
Yeah, yeah,
generalize it, and it's just like this just happened in the past.
yeah. It was the Lost in the Dream tour. So whenever that album came out, maybe 2014, I'm guessing. Um, so yeah, that was a big one. They're a band I just love. Only seen them twice, but I um yeah, those are probably the ones that just stick out off the top of my head. Like, I'd have to kind of go through my collection and
Go through your catalog. I'm curious then because I mean, obviously how we got connected, but I don't recall you doing like I don't recall you doing an episode on Jamie's show. Um so where did the Tragically Hip come into your life then?
well, the Hip were a band. So back when we first started out, or when I first started listening to music, like I mentioned before, it was like Aerosmith and GNR, those bands. And the Hip were a band actually my dad was the first one to bring them up to me. He said, "Oh, I saw this band on like I think it was the Fifth Estate or something, another Canadian TV show. It was like an investigative sort of like a 60 Minutes type show, I guess." And he saw this band called the Tragically Hip, and of course, it's your dad saying that, like, oh, whatever, like that sounds lame.
For
So I
sure.
didn't really think much of it, but he's like, "Oh yeah, they're this up and coming Canadian band," and okay, and then I think I heard New Orleans is Sinking on the radio, and I really liked it. Um, but I still kind of had this rule, but I need to hear like more than one good song before I'm going to invest in a band, typically. So I was at my friend Matt's house, and 38 Years Old came on the radio. And I think I did tell this story on Discovering Downie, but I thought it was Tracy Chapman at first.
You did because I remember this. This was one of the first things that really and when we dive more into actually discovering Downing, this was one of the first things that really like I don't know what it was like because throughout this, and I said this to you, like all these different things that you like kept bringing up and all these different whatevers. And I remember you bringing that up. And how like even if it wasn't like they were released at the same time, and then I like actually looked up the two songs and it was literally like the exact same time. Like it was so funny how you had like brought that up, but it was purely like speculation on your part. You're like, I'm not sure, but I think they were like released around the same time. And I'm like, how does he know these things?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that, you know, it was on kind of at a low volume, but I just heard the warble in the voice, and I was kind of like, it sounded like something she would do, you know. And I only really probably knew her one song, which would have been big at the time, "Fast Car," and and then I kind of turned up a bit, and you know, they announced it was the Tragically Hip, and I said, okay, well, that's two songs I like, so got the album, and I'm pretty sure it was a Columbia House order because it was a CD. I didn't have it on. If I would have just bought it in the store, I would have bought a cassette so I could listen to my car, or maybe I didn't have a car yet. No, I guess I wouldn't have had a car yet, but I would have, you know, bought a cassette. So it must have been a Columbia House order, and so I got Anthem right during Up to Here, their first full length, and they were like the only band I listened to that weren't sort of like hard rock, heavy metal. You know, like they, you know, they were rock, and they were, you know, there were some songs that were faster on that album, but they were more like bluesy. Um, you know, they weren't quite as like you know, they weren't like hair metal or anything. They're
Right. For sure.
just kind of more like regular guys, and I just really liked them. And I remember getting Road Apples, like it's one of those vivid memories. I remember getting the CD and coming home, and I was playing some weird game on a. We had just gotten a computer, our first PC. I was playing this really weird, I don't know what it was, but and just listening to that album and listening to it over and over, and I just got more and more into them. And then Fully Completely comes out, and I remember having the CD, and I taped it onto a tape, and so I could listen to my car by this time I'm driving. And then and that's the tour I saw them on. So I graduated high school, and then I guess it was a year later I saw them in 93 roadside attraction in a place called Seabird Island, which is about an hour and a half drive from Vancouver. um, I was still up in the Okanagan at the time, so came down with a couple friends and watched the show, and just I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to make of Gord. It was just so, he was so over the top. And I think I've mentioned before the laminar flow rant that he does, and he was doing stuff like that all night, just all these rants, and he was you know, like singing or talking over guitar solos and stuff. And I remember being really kind of thrown off, like, because I was, you know, a guitar player, and I'm thinking, what do his bandmates think of this? Like, he's talking over top of my solo, like, you know. And I honestly had a bit of a, it made me a bit uncomfortable, that concert, in some ways. Like, I loved it,
Yeah.
and it was amazing, and like this massive crowd in the middle of a forest, like, you know, I don't know, 20, 30,000 people, whatever it was. And you know, Midnight Oil opened for them, which was crazy in itself, like the fact that,
Absolutely.
and Midnight Oil at the peak of their popularity were opening for the Hip. And if you read the book, you'll, you know, how that was like strategic on Jake Gould's part. um but it was the right call. Like, the Hip were the draw, like they were
Yep.
massive
Yep.
at the time, like just
Yep.
I,
And they even talk about that in the docuseries too. Like if you watch the docuseries, you know, the guys from Midnight Oil are in there and they talk about that too.
yeah, so that really, I mean, it's one of those concerts where once I digested it, I liked it even more.
Yep.
You know, like once I got around the, because I when I had never really watched clips. I mean, there was no YouTube. I didn't have cable, so I didn't have, you know, much music at the time. So I didn't really know how to take it. And I didn't know, like, is he being serious? Is he drunk? Is there something wrong with him? Like, I didn't know what to make of Gord Downie when I first saw him.
Right. Right.
And you know, and looking back now, it's just hilarious. Like, it was awesome. It was so intriguing. Like, you can't take your eyes off him. But I just kept thinking to myself, like, give the other guys in the band a bit of a, you know, a
That's
moment or
how it
whatever.
was.
But
Like I told you, my mom has just come in at the ground floor and has known nothing except for what I've exposed her to and what I've sent her and what she's been exposed to with being in the lives on Sunday night in the chat and everything. And when I took her to the Strictly Hip and we talked about this, the killer whale tank rant in New Orleans is sinking, and I was like, "Mom, this is so big," because I had seen so many Strictly Hip shows and he had never done it. And obviously it's not gonna be anything at all near, the original. And so after I'm like explaining to her what this is and everything, and I'm like, "I'm gonna send you some stuff." And so I sent her some videos that I had found, and she said the same thing. She was like kind of a little like not sure because she hadn't watched the docuseries, and so she hadn't really experienced anything at all at that point. And she was like not really sure. But I'm like, just give it time, listen to it, absorb it, and really look at it from an artistic mindset. And like after that, she was just like, okay, but it was the same sort of thing. It was that initial reaction when you're just like not sure. You're like, I don't know what to make here. Is this guy just being like an asshole on stage, kind of, like a pretentious lead singer in a way, and like his band secretly hates him because he's doing this. And so I can see how that would be the case because that was definitely for my mom too. And I'm like, no, just wait. And so she's like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I just once I had time to kind of absorb the what I'd
Hmm.
seen, it started making sense and just made me love them more. And
For
then
sure.
I ended up seeing them. My next show was the smallest show I ever saw them at, was which was a club in Seattle. I think I told this story once, where I had to get a fake ID because I wasn't 21 yet. Went down to a club in Seattle with some friends who were all of age, and luckily got in. And saw them play a 500 seat venue, a place called Under the Rail, right before or right around the time Day for Night, like the same month that Day for Night came out. And that was just incredible seeing them at a small venue.
Oh
And
yeah.
then, a couple months later, they're playing, 3 nights at, the hockey arena, like, um,
Mhm.
on the same tour. So I got to see that tour a couple times in, a small club and then an arena, and then just kept going every year, like the roadside, every second year would be a roadside attraction show. So if you don't know, another roadside attraction is a festival the Hip put on, and they did one in 93, 95, 97. um so the second and third one were at a place called, at UBC, the university I went to, at the I guess the football stadium, outdoor area, and where the Lollapaloozas were all, well, the first few were held, and just saw so many great bands. I remember the second one, the 1995 one. I was introduced to Spirit of the West for the first time, which is a band I definitely want to talk about at some point. Um, amazing Canadian band that should be known, even in this country, more than they are. But um, and yeah, just kept following the band. I did, like Jamie, I had a bit of a dip where, around music at work and in Violet Light, I kind of lost interest a little bit. It's not that I lost interest, it was more that, this is like late 90s, right around turn of the century. I'm starting, this is when I'm going to music school. I'm being introduced to so much new music and
Yep.
getting to things that are more experimental, and so it's not that I disliked what the Hip were doing. I just lost interest a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, a few years went by, and I don't know. I kept buying their albums, and I just it kind of started growing again. And then I saw the fully completely anniversary tour at the arena here, and that was just amazing. And I was like, I think I'm good. Like, I honestly, at that show, I was like, I think I've seen them like whatever 13, 14 times now. Um, it kind of like felt like leaving it on a high note. And I've done this with other bands too, where like then they
For
announce another
sure.
tour and I'm back.
For
But so
sure.
it probably wouldn't have, but in my mind, it was like, this is a good place to leave this band that I love so much. And then, of course, like just a few months later was the announcement of his cancer, and So I was fortunate enough to go to the last two Vancouver shows, which was they were the second and third shows of the tour, and yeah, and watched live with everyone else, like we talked about last night, the final Kingston show, and yeah, and yeah, and
Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Please be sure to leave a review of the show. It would mean so much to me, and it helps get this podcast into the ears of even more fellow music fans. If you're not already following the show on social media, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Dropped Among This Crowd Podcast, or check out datcmediacompany.com for more. Thank you again. I'll see you around these parts real soon. Mad love.